Hey everybody, welcome to today's live room, this week's edition. I'm Alex Frank, host of the Lockdown Bearcats podcast. We're live on YouTube. Russ Heltman, my colleague at All Bearcats and Sports Illustrated, going to join me in just a matter of moments for our weekly conversation. A lot to get to this week, a lot happening within the football program, the men's basketball program, coming off a wildly entertaining Crosstown Shootout this past weekend. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about Brady Drogosh upholding his commitment at the University of Cincinnati. We'll talk about Kerry Combs being retained, and we'll welcome in Russ Heltman, my colleague Bearcats and Sports Illustrated. Russ, good to have you back on, man. And ever since we finally met in person, a lot of good things have happened, right?
Yeah, it's been a very eventful, 10 days since we met for the first time, Alex. It is wild, wild west out here in UC Athletics land. A lot of news.
Maybe I should bring the Escape Club into this, I mean, the Wild Wild West, one of my favorite. Maybe that's the song I was thinking of listening to yesterday that I didn't get to. So Russ, as you like to say, we're going to show people how the sausage is made. We got a live room going. You're back in Cincinnati. I'm currently in Georgia. I was in Cincinnati last week, in Ohio last week. So looking forward to getting back up there in February. We got a game tonight, Russ. We got the battle for the, what do we call it? Do we call it the battle for the Victory Bell in basketball? No,
that doesn't really have a name, I don't think.
The battle for the
Also, you're echoing a little bit on your end, Alex. Just a heads up.
Okay. All right, I'll turn my volume down. When you talk, Russ, I'll mute my microphone. Yeah, the echoing here. See, with an increase, and I'll just, should I disclose this? I don't know, but
let's just move on.
Anyway,
let's get into it, my man.
Let's just move on. We got a lot to get to today. We'll get to the chat after our conversation. Thanks again for everybody who was on our live room last week. That was take one. This is take two. So lot to get to today. Russ, you I didn't even mention this. I feel like this is kind of like pushed down on the news cycle, Russ. Wes Miller got a contract extension.
Yeah, that's the newest bit of news. I guess the second newest bit of news, considering Ivan Pace's consensus or unanimous All-American status, the first unanimous All-American in the history of the Bearcats football program. And Wes Miller gets himself a little double-up salary and then some on his new deal at UC.
A lot happening. We got it all right for you right here on Locked On Bearcats.
Our Locked On Bearcats, your daily podcast on the Cincinnati Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Well, all right. Thank you for joining us. See, this is the beauty of live rooms. We don't know if you're joining us today, Wednesday, when this sausage is made, or if you're listening to this on Friday. But regardless, thanks for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day. It's free and available everywhere that you get your podcast and on YouTube. Don't forget to subscribe to our Locked On Bearcats YouTube channel. Follow it too to get an alert every time that we drop a new episode, including this live room, which will be podcasted or up in podcast form on Friday. Today's episode of Locked On Bearcats is brought to you by Bet Online. Bet Online as you cover to this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. Bet Online, where the game starts. I'm Alex Frank, Locked On Bearcats host each and every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Russ Heltman is my colleague at All Bearcats and Sports Illustrated. Russ, I am 3 weeks late, if you will, but I am going to Florida this weekend. So you were in Florida a few weeks ago, as you documented well on this podcast. So both of us will have invaded the Sunshine State. But let's get to where do we start? I mean, the last time we were on, right, we were in the midst of a head coaching change. And since then, what have we had? We've had Brady Drogosh decide to uphold his commitment. We've had Luke Kandra commit to Cincinnati after being in the transfer portal. Cincinnati native, hometown hero. We've had Kerry Combs retained. We have had Jaden Davis commit. Wes Miller get a contract extension. And Russ, I think, and I said this on today's show, the fact that Scott Satterfield in his first 10 days, what has he done that you can say, I don't like that? It's been a pretty good 10 days, hasn't it been?
You and I texted about it. It's the melding of the greatness that helped create the greatest football team in the history of UC last year. Of course, the Coleraine contingent, the hometown hero contingent. You retain that aspect of the old era in a guy like Kerry Combs, who's going to give you all of that recruiting acumen here in the tri-state area. And then you also bring in the best of both worlds in terms of Pete Thomas. You got, of course, Brian Brown retained on the staff. Thomas going to be the quarterback's coach. Brian Brown going to be the defensive coordinator, and just the national recruiting footprint that Satterfield's staff at Louisville was starting to get a hold of, and that can now put some lighter fluid on in Clifton. It's been pretty hard to criticize the things happening around the UC football program ever since Scott Satterfield smartly declared he will not be involved in this Fenway Bowl process, and saying that he's going to spend the next 2 weeks and the past 10 days he has putting together his staff and getting recruits on board for the 2023 class, and transfer portal recruits as well. Offers going out, a bevy of them over the last week or so. And of course, Luke Andrew, the first transfer to commit to the program and the only portal commitment that they've had so far. But I would expect definitely some ensuing commitments before the new year.
So early signing day is next Wednesday.
December 21st. Yep.
December 21st. So that's a week from today. I mean, I hope my math did me right there. Anyway, so yeah, you mentioned all the things that have happened, and I didn't even mention like some of the assistant coaches who have followed Scott Satterfield, including defensive coordinator, Louisville's defensive coordinator. So a lot of change, but at the same time, a lot of familiarity. Here's my question to you, Russ. Like, we know the importance of Kerry Combs staying, but put into words what exactly it means for this program that's in transition. Because I think the biggest thing with this is this. Scott Satterfield doesn't know this area, but the fact that he is keeping not just a guy who knows this area, it's a valuable resource. And that is a huge, huge win for this program in words that maybe we don't even have for, right?
Right. And of course, we know like it was the first year back in the program for Kerry Combs last year. Obviously had different stints in the late 2000s before going on to coach at the Tennessee Titans and at Ohio State and all that. But the recruiting footprint doesn't change when you go to different jobs. Your relationships don't change. They stay the same, and they're cultivated even more because of how much of a hotbed this area is. The tri-state area of Cincinnati and going into the outskirts of Indiana there in northern Kentucky. So the fact that he has been cultivating that experience, cultivating those relationships, dating back to being coach in the high school ranks in the early 90s, it is so invaluable. One of the first questions Scott Satterfield got, I believe, is from recruiting 24/7 sports recruiting expert Mick Walker, saying, I've talked to coaches in this area and they say that they don't have a relationship with you. That's what he said. You were sitting right there. We both heard it at the press conference last week introducing Scott Satterfield. Now there's a bridge there to establish that relationship and establish that pipeline in the hometown of these recruits to a now Power 5 program in the Big 12, one of the three best conferences in America, right there, neck and neck with in terms of growth, in terms of innovation, in terms of willingness to add more teams, add more programs. You have that option now if you're a hometown high four-star player. Hey, a five-star player. We haven't had many of those in this area in the past 5 years, but it is possible, I think, to get those recruits now because you have the system of Scott Satterfield, the recruiting acumen of Kerry Combs, the overall just great momentum for the program in general. And obviously, the only way to keep that going is the win-loss column in the fall. And we're going to be able to figure out truly how much of an impact this melding of former Bearcat staff and new Bearcat staff can come together when we start seeing some action on the football field come the first week of September, last week of August. And of course, we'll be there to see fall camp at Camp Higher Ground. Will they keep that? We don't even know. I'm sure they will try to keep that tradition going as Luke Fickell did. But all of this new stuff, it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things until you see how that talent is getting coached on the field and how that talent executes on the field. But as you mentioned, Alex, there are very few things to throw stones at in terms of having issues with the way Scott Satterfield's approached the recruiting class that's here at UC, approached the coaching staff that he's going to build here at UC, and approached the bowl game process, which was the first thing he had to get on his table and get off his table. And it seems like doing that has really been a big benefit for this program, that when you have a coaching change like this in the short time frames of college football, you cannot waste a single second.
I mean, like, that's a great point. And I said this earlier this week. And Scott Satterfield hasn't coached a game yet, Russ. So,
and he's a 25-24 coach at Louisville, and that's the biggest hang up. That's the first thing people look at and the first thing people gripe with when they see that hire. Yeah.
That's a winning record.
Barely.
Doesn't matter. It's a winning record. Louisville was 2-10 in 2018. That Louisville team was terrible. Clemson creamed them that year. Now, Clemson creamed everybody, including Alabama in the national championship that year. But Russ, the next year they were 8-4. Like, I remember, I'll never forget this. I was with some of our Bearcats media staff members Labor Day night, 2019. Louisville's first game was against Notre Dame. And I mean, I think they lost by like 2 or 3 scores, but like, that was a good Notre Dame program Louisville was playing, and they went 8-3 the rest of the way. So, like,
yeah.
And not only that,
he follows it up with 4-7, 6-7, 7-5. Never got to 8 wins again at Louisville. So those are the things. The momentum has to continue. That's the biggest thing.
Yes.
The momentum cannot slow down in Cliff.
Okay, and that's a great point, Russ, because I said this on today's show. Expectations, and we talked about this last Monday. Year one, I don't think we should be sitting up here and just saying, "Oh, geez, I just hope the Bearcats make a bowl game." Russ, I think 8-4 is reasonable. But when you do that, you have to then sustain that year after year, and I think we're going to hold Scott Satterfield to that standard in that regard with Luke Fickell, because Luke Fickell went 10-2, Cinderella, or 11-2 in 2018. And then what did he do? He followed it up with an 11-3 season in 2019. Conference championship the year after that, New Year's 6. College football playoff the year after that. 9-3 this year after losing 9 players to the NFL draft. So I think we're hitting on something here, Russ, sustainability. But I don't think that's something you can really think about right now, because we haven't even seen year one in the Big 12. It's like the program's not starting over, but in a way, it's a new era. I think that's how we're looking at this, right?
No doubt. And I think I'm not going to put that kind of expectation on Scott Satterfield. 6 wins, I think, is the bar to clear. Then in the first season in the Big 12 with the Pitt Panthers on your schedule, they should be a decent team in the ACC, and they're Pat Narduzzi. Like, the fact you have to go to Pitt as well could make it even more difficult. So I think 6 wins, 7 wins, just getting to a bowl game, keeping the bottom from falling out in terms of win-loss structure in this program, and just getting to that 2024 completely stable scenario where you have your first real recruiting class coming in. I'm not going to put 8 wins as an expectation on this team, but I agree. Like, you just have to figure out a way to carry things forward in the Big 12. And then once you can catch your breath, once you can get a couple recruiting classes underneath you, then the expectations start to really fire up and start to really shoot off. Because in this scenario, by the time we expect those things to fall in place, it'll be 2024, Alex. And what happens in 2024? 8 more teams get to crack the college football playoff and vie for their chance at a national title. Now, will that end up being a scenario where the Big 12 champion is the only Big 12 team to get in because the at-large teams are dominated by the more powerful and more money powerful, especially conferences in the Big 10 and the SEC? We'll have to see how that plays out. Maybe the Big 12 will only end up getting 1 spot every year, 2 every couple of years, and that's the way it'll play out. But the Bearcats are going to be in the thick of this race. They have the resources. They have the confidence. They have the want to, in terms of the Board of Trustees down to AD John Cunningham, to compete for Big 12 titles and therefore national titles. And it's going to take some time. I preach patience this week with Wes Miller. The administration obviously thinks patience is the best virtue with Wes Miller as well, because 24 hours after I published that, he was extended. So patience is going to be a big theme for this Bearcats athletics program, especially the top two flagship sports over the first couple of years in the Big 12.
So several points that I brought up on today's show, and if you haven't listened to today's show yet, I'll talk about those here. This is the beauty of Live Room. Like, I mean, you can combine podcasting and breaking news and, up to the minute here on Live Rooms. I really like doing these. So Russ, eventually, Russ, what you and I are going to do once I'm back in Ohio is we're going to do a live room from the golf course, right? So, when you're teeing off, well, I think you have to be quiet on the golf course. By the way, I do need to see if I can get memorial tickets for this year. Anyway, that's a story for another day. But Russ and I are big into golf. If you haven't gotten the memo yet, so patience being a virtue. So I compared, and we'll go to basketball here. Right, basketball's big enough right now where I don't have to push it to the end of the show, Russ. Right, I'm doing this right. Okay, so and I read your stuff on All Bearcats, Russ, and you did preach patience. And I think about it this way. Remember, and I said this on today's show, January 2021, Bengals president Mike Brown sends that letter to the fan base saying that they remained bullish on the foundation Zach Taylor is building. Russ, you remember that, right?
Right, yeah.
This was after 2020. They just got bludgeoned by the Ravens 38-3, gave up over 400 yards rushing. You're saying fire Zach Taylor, fire Lou Anarumo. Russ, what have the Bengals done since that letter was written?
They've gone to a Super Bowl, and they are now controlling their destiny for a number 2 seed in the AFC.
Oh. Number 2 seed? Or did you say number 2 or number 1 seed?
Well, Kansas City has to lose again for them to control their number 1 seed destiny.
Well,
but if they win out, they will be guaranteed the 2 seed, yes.
Ooh, so 2 playoff games potentially at home. How about that? Anyway, maybe 3. So, and then Mike Brown was saying, if I can, I'll find that letter in a minute. But what point here is this? That worked. The patience there worked. So this can too with Wes Miller, right? And I just think it's a matter of this team finding their identity, because they've played in several big games. And every time they do, they always start off slow. Now, they play hard. I mean, they battled their way back on Saturday. But eventually you're going to have to, in big games, Russ, you're going to have to set the tone. You're going to have a game plan and an identity. And there's a lot of things that when the Bearcats are playing well, they do really well. But when they get to the big stage, it's like you don't really know what they're doing. Is that what you're seeing?
It's just they don't have enough talent, man. That's the bottom line with this basketball program right now. They need more talent. They're bringing in more talent next year, 2 top 55 recruits. They don't have a single – Landers Nolly is like the lone – you can't even – I'm not even going to count him because he's a senior. Rob Finnis, he's a senior. These guys are way developed, and they're not top 50 players in the country, so I'm not going to say that they're top 50 prospects because that was 4 years ago last time that happened. Currently on this team, Dan Skillings is the most talented player with the youngest timeline, him and Victor Lockin. And Lockin's been, I would say, the MVP of the entire team so far. He's definitely been the most consistent player on the roster through the first 10 games of the season. They need more talent. They're going to get more talent. So that way, when they have that talent, they can execute the things that I'm seeing Coach Miller practice and preach in those sessions during the middle of the week when we're allowed to be in that gym. They're going to be able to execute the things that he wants to have as an identity on the floor in games, and they're going to be able to win basketball games in front of packed crowds at Fifth Third Arena. But right now, when you have a coaching exodus and a coaching morass like they've had over the past 4 years, 3 different coaches in that span, it's just really difficult in the sport of college basketball to find any flash in the pan, catch magic in a bottle type of run with a roster that gets turned over every year and a coach that's only been on the job less than 18 months if you don't give him the time to be able to breathe out his vision. So to me, the bottom line is this team is just not talented enough. David DeJulius is once again the best player on the team. And that's just, it's not shocking. I would say it's a little disappointing, but it's kind of to be expected when Wes Miller has had one true recruiting class in the 2 seasons he's been on campus. So once he gets that next recruiting class, and maybe there's a Flory Badunga mixed in there, maybe he reclassifies for 2023, and he's the big man they add as a top 5 recruit nationally among all recruiting services, that's when the Wes Miller vision can really start coming to fruition. Because, I mean, I see it in practice. This team is not talented enough to execute the things that Russ Miller wants to execute at a high level on a game-in, game-out basis. He did not become the winningest head coach under 40 years old in the history of the sport because he has bad schemes and bad game plans and does not connect with players. All those things very well, but talent is not there to allow him to fully flourish as a head coach. And that's just that sometimes that's the bottom line. Sometimes you don't have enough guys that can make shots. And right now the Bearcats do not have enough guys that can make shots.
Interesting, because it felt like at times on Saturday, the Bearcats had opportunities to get back into the game, but they just couldn't execute offensively. And then down the stretch, they didn't get that one crucial stop defensively. Now, you did say recently on All Bearcats that you like what you're seeing in practice with the intensity. And so maybe it's just a matter of that carrying over into games. And then once Wes Miller gets the players that fit his system, maybe perhaps this program is going to be fine. I do believe, and I really think after what he said to Dan Horde and Terry Nelson and Mo Egger on the postgame show, and did he reiterate that message in his postgame press conference to all of you with members of the media?
Yeah, how he wants it really bad for the program,
Yes.
that message. Yeah, how he'll be in the grave. Yep.
Yeah, and I think that I want to believe him, and I do, because, I mean, look, this guy is coaching his butt off. He really is. And ever since he got here, you can tell he wants it. He understands. If you remember his introductory press conference, for those of you listening, he talked about how this program, pride, competing at the highest level. He understands this program's history. And so I think it's a matter of getting there. And here's the thing, too. Russ, this Bearcats program has now lost 4 straight games to Xavier. I don't think that should happen ever again, because when you think about – and it's been that way. Xavier has owned this rivalry since the 90s. But I think about how the Bearcats are going to the Big 12, and they've been to 6 Final Fours. Xavier hasn't been to a Final Four. It's like almost now common for Xavier to beat Cincinnati, and you battle all the way back only to lose in that fashion on Saturday, and it sets something off in Wes Miller. And I've heard people talk about how, well, does the shootout still have its luster? And yes, it does. And for Wes Miller to say that, that's going to maybe set the stage for next year when you go into the Cintas Center as a Power 5 team, looking for your first win there since 2000.
I believe it's 2001. Yeah,
2001. I mean, that goes back to the Steve Logan days.
Yep.
So I want to believe Wes Miller. You are preaching patience. Maybe those virtues will pay off. All right, we'll get to Brady Drogosh. We will get to the Wasabi Fenway Bowl on Saturday. So much more to get to, so keep it here in the live room. And if you're listening to this on Friday, your first listen every day, I'm here to tell you that this episode, of Locked On Bearcats is brought to you by Bet Online. Right now, head to beton.net, your number one source for sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season, which starts on today if you're listening to this in podcast form, or Friday if you're listening to this in the live room. If you did, we've got it all. And by the way, basketball and the World Cup are included too. We've got it all at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts, you can even find those at BetOnline as well. We're always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting info. Head to the website today, or just betting info in general. Head to the website today, or use your mobile device to learn more. Right now, Cincinnati on Saturday in the Wasabi Fenway Bowl against Louisville, still listed as a 1.5 underdog. But you can head to BetOnline today, or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. Hey, thank you for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. The biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Peter Bukowski hosts, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcast. Back here in the live room, we'll get to your chat after the show. I'm Alex Frank, host of Locked On Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and my colleague at All Bearcats and Sports Illustrated, Russ Heltman, joining me as he does mostly every week here on Locked On Bearcats. So let's talk about Brady Drogosh. Russ, the news broke Monday. Or was it Sunday? Either way, Brady Drogosh is staying home. He is upholding his commitment, and I think that is that a bigger win than retaining Kerry Combs?
That's a good little debate right there. I would say maybe slightly. It's a little bit of a bigger win because you just have that breather sigh of relief. Every single Power 5 program that wants to win at a high level has to bring in a good quarterback every single cycle because of the transfer portal, because of just all the options these guys have out there nowadays. I mean, when you look at the NCAA total starting quarterbacks in week 1 this year, I believe 60 plus were transfers. Right around 55 to 60 starting quarterbacks were transfers, including right here in Cincinnati and Ben Bryant. So the fact that it's so easy to move in the portal these days, you just have to get that guy locked in, and you have to get one of those top tier options in your program. And the fact that Drogosh is sticking with the Bearcats is a big development for UC. And I think it's really cool how he never really seemed to waver. It seems like he was keeping a good head on his shoulders, keeping a very mature approach to all this, willing to hear Scott Satterfield out, went to UC this past weekend for his official visit, and now he's locked in as maybe the next starting quarterback for the Cincinnati Bearcats. We'll see how Evan Prater performs this week. I unfortunately have not been able to make it to practice for the bowl game because it's been held in the AM hours, and I'm here doing the day job at the radio station, so I've not been able to get out there to see how he's been improving, how he's looked in terms of passing the football ever since that 10 for 26 disastrous performance against Tulane that really stuck a nail, or was part of the reason the Bearcats had a nail stuck in their coffin in the 2022 season. So Drogosh lit up the entire Michigan high school football scene at De La Salle this year, led his team to a 52-13 victory in the state title game. He is definitively a dual threat weapon, can put 250 and 100 yards on the ground on you without blinking. And he's a guy that, from what I've seen, throws a better football than Evan Prater. So I wouldn't be shocked if Brady Drogosh is fighting for a starting spot next year. Maybe they don't even entertain that notion. Maybe they think, hey, Evan Prater, we're going to go with him. We're going to give him the reins, or we're going to bring in another transfer. That's possible. But bottom line, from what I've seen of Brady Drogosh, he has the talent to start as a freshman in the Big 12.
So that's going to make this quarterback battle in the offseason really interesting, because you had the guy who you thought was the future highest rated recruit in the 24/7 sports era in Bearcats history, and now you got Brady Drogosh from nearby Warren, Michigan, and now essentially, Russ, depending on what happens, like, I just think about how weird this is with Evan Prater. He gets passed over by Ben Bryant, and now he might get passed over by a freshman in Brady Drogosh. Is that a good thing?
He didn't get passed over. He got beat out. That's the bottom line.
Okay.
The better quarterback played all season long. And you and I were debating this all season. At one point, I was saying, give Evan Prater a chance, because I felt as if the season was kind of slipping away anyways. They were not a AAC championship caliber team, and they ended up not being that. So the fact that they've already wasted that time, you get to see what Evan Prater is a little bit in the game against Temple. That was a good on-ramp for him. And then he completely falls flat against Tulane. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. Sure, he ran the ball at a decent clip, but the offense was not working. And he was missing a lot of throws on plays that did work, on plays that did get wide receivers open. Evan Prater was not great. And now he gets another chance to face another top 20 scoring defense in the Louisville Cardinals, ranked 19th nationally in points allowed in 2022. They will obviously be without defensive coordinator Brian Brown and a lot of different pieces on that defense. So it's not necessarily the same unit that put up those numbers and achieved that top 20 status throughout the season. But that's even more reason why Evan Prater, amidst all of this chaos and the chaos in the Bearcats' own offense, lack of weapons on his side, it should even the playing field, and it should still be a pretty tough matchup in terms of the UC offense versus the Louisville defense. And a guy in Evan Prater who's going to be playing without Trey Tucker, without Josh Wiley, without Leonard Taylor, without Jaden Thompson, without Nick Mardner. How does he step up? Can he elevate this offense with his own play instead of the play around him? We're going to find out on Saturday.
See, that to me is what's so interesting about this bowl game, Russ. It's like Evan Prater, like, who's he going to be able to throw to? Tyler Scott, Will Poling? I mean, those are two good guys to throw the ball to, but like
Shimon Mater, I'm very interested to see what Shimon Mater
that's another
looks
guy
like.
too. That's another guy too.
I believe he was the number 1 recruit in the 2020 class. I'm pretty sure the highest rated recruit on 24/7 Sports, and he's a guy who's kind of chirped a little bit here and there. He clearly is a competitor. He wants to see playing time. Had 1 catch for 32 yards this year. I think he could definitely be a weapon and someone that may pop in that Fenway Bowl.
Yeah. So what are your expectations for Saturday in the Fenway Bowl, Russ?
It's a grab bag of mystery, man. Who knows who's going to play? Who knows who's going to actually be out there? We'll see when they actually line them up. I would be shocked if either team gets over 24, 27 points. I think the defenses are going to dominate because that's where most of the talent was retained for both teams in terms of transfer portal losses after the season and after the loss of both of their head coaches. So I see a low-scoring, kind of dragged out game on the Fenway Park field that ends up being a defensive showcase and maybe a nice little stamp on the career of Ivan Pace Jr., who just set history at UC as the first unanimous All-American in team history.
Well, we know. So is Ivan playing on? I think I saw something that Ivan's going to play. Is Deshaun going to play?
Deshaun Pace is, I believe, playing. He traveled with the team, so I'm guessing he was going to play. There's been no rumblings that he will not play. So
it's just so. I mean, this is just like from where this team has been in the previous years in bowl games. I mean, that is just like you really like do wonder, like, do people in Cincinnati, you're there right now, like, are they like, are they invested in this bowl game? Like, do they care about this bowl game? No.
I don't think so. I haven't really heard a lot of fire for it. I haven't heard. I mean, it's kind of been approached the same way that the head coach has approached it. It's time to focus on the staff, the recruiting, the retainment of talent, and then nobody's really focused on the Fenway Bowl because what is it? I mean, what does it really matter? What does it really matter? Cool, it affects the program bowl record. Who cares? Who cares about bowl records? It's like me as an Ohio University fan. I don't care if they go win the Camellia Bowl. I want the first MAC title since 1968, and they still can't give that to me. Bearcats fans wanted to three-peat in the AAC and go to a New Year's Six game. That's the level that they would have cared at, and rightfully so. That's the standard that's been set at this program, and that's the standard I think that's kind of been set in all of college football with the more teams in the playoff to give more programs chances to lift national titles that their fan bases will actually not respect isn't the right word, but praise and beloved and cherish much more than winning the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl or something like that. Just who cares? What does it matter?
Yeah. What does it really?
You get the same amount of money if you win and if you lose, if you go to the bowl. So
we'll look ahead to tonight's matchup on the hardwood between the Bearcats and Miami, Ohio, featuring a familiar foe to Cincinnati Bearcats basketball. We'll get into all of that after I tell you all how this episode of Locked On Bearcats is brought to you by NHTSA. So you're hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks. A few becomes a few too many. And as the evening comes to an end, and people start to head out, you think of calling for a ride, but now you live nearby, you can make it home okay. It's no big deal. What are the odds you'll get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone. Everyone knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. Rounding out today's live room and Friday's podcast version with Russ Heltman, my colleague at All Bearcats and Sports Illustrated. I'm Alex Frank, host of Locked On Bearcats, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Russ, you wrote the preview for tonight's.
Yeah, before we get to the Miami game, Alex, we have breaking news. Yeah. We just talked about Evan Prater's weapons, and we may want to post this show tomorrow, so it's not as out of date for Friday. But Tyler Scott has just opted out of the bowl game, and he will not be available. He is going to prepare for the NFL draft, and so now the UC Bearcats have lost every starting pass catcher, or all 5 leading pass catchers from the Fenway Bowl roster in Nick Mardner, Jaden Thompson, Tyler Scott, Trey Tucker, Leonard Taylor, and Josh Wiley. So quite the daunting task for Evan Prater in this offense to overcome on Saturday.
Now I'm wondering if Tyler Scott even made the trip with the team.
Yeah, I didn't see. I highly doubt it. I didn't see him. I didn't peruse all the photos of the team getting on the plane specifically, but in the ones that I saw just offhand, I did see Deshaun Pace, but I didn't see Tyler Scott. And I hadn't heard much about Tyler Scott over the past week. So yeah, there you go. He is rightfully going to exit the program. And as the team leader in yards per catch this season, every one of his touchdowns, 20 plus yards, he's going to the NFL as probably one of the premier deep threat options in the draft.
So Tyler Scott, let me see, so this is saying that Tyler Scott is not only opting out, but he's declaring for the NFL draft. I mean, that has me worried about who's even going to be a pass catcher next year for Cincinnati. I mean,
that's why they're talking to I think it's FIU, one of the FIU wide receiver. I forget his name. Yeah, Tyrese Chambers. Yeah, he's a solid talent. He could be a plug and play option for whichever guy's playing quarterback. Yeah. There's a lot of stuff that that this coaching staff is going to have to comb through and figure out in terms of offensive weapons in 2023. What a just complete flip in terms of stockpile of weapons in 2022 to what is going to be the options in 2023. Crazy.
Yeah, well, that puts an emphasis on recruiting. That puts an emphasis on the transfer portal. Russ, give us a brief preview of tonight's matchup on the hardwood between the Bearcats and the 4-5 Miami Redhawks.
You see about a 17-point favorite here. It's another kind of situation where they go from really tough opponent to really easy opponent. They should be able to handle Miami easily as long as they don't give up. As long as they don't let them get hot from outside. They're one of the top 40 teams in the country shooting the 3-ball, and they have the second best free throw percentage in the entire nation right now. So don't give them easy whistles around the rim. Don't give them easy looks around the 3-point line, and you should be able to handle this Miami team very easily in what would be, I believe, the 12th straight victory for UC over Miami. Just an absolute domination of this series over the past few years. Big option for Miami. Their number 1 player is Mekhi Larry. He is averaging 15.7 points, 3.4 rebounds, and 3.8 assists, but that's on 39% shooting. Like, the guy has not been efficient. And another option for the Redhawks to keep an eye out on is Anderson Marambo. He's 6'8", 305 pounds, Alex. 6'8", 305, an absolute behemoth out there, averaging 13, 4.6 rebounds and 2.3 assists. He is very efficient around the rim, over 50% on 2-point shots in his early portion of this 2022-23 season. So the fact that you have that big of an option against a team that's a little bit weak at the 4 position and a little bit thin in the front court right now, considering Kalu Ezikpe has been an absolute ghost, getting DNPs over the past few games, that could be a mismatch that dooms the Bearcats a little bit, maybe dooms them from not covering, but at home, flipping this game from a 59-58 road win at Miami last year in a hostile environment that the Redhawks were able to put together. I don't know that the Bearcats should have much trouble with Miami in Fifth Third Arena on Wednesday night.
It's a struggling defense. Bearcats offense has performed well so far this season.
One correction. The Bearcats going for their 15th straight win over Miami.
Yeah. 15th straight win. How about that? I will say the Bearcats win this game. I'll say 7.
That sounds about right. Yeah. Right on the number. You're going to go right with Vegas. That's usually smart to pick right along the Vegas line. That's a smart man at work here, people.
What are we, 18 days away from sports betting being legal in Ohio?
We are so close.
right.
I can taste it, Alex. I don't have to play fantasy football ever again. Praise be. Praise be.
All right.
The modern
All right,
times alive in Ohio.
So we'll run through the comments here briefly. I know, Russ, you got to run with the Tyler Scott news. I'm just gonna post this show. I did Friday's sponsors, but I'll post it today because there is some big news that if you're listening live, you know about. Excuse me. Loser Troll. That's a good name.
We got 3 loser troll comments and
Actually,
no questions, so I don't even know if we need to run
no
through
questions. Yeah,
the
Ben
live stream
Bryant was a
comments.
bread and butter. Football used to be able to walk through the gate even without student ID, or basketball was bread and butter. Okay, I thought Ben Bryant for some reason. KC needs his time at head coach at UC. He deserves it. That's interesting. I want Bengals versus Bearcats in the Taco Bell Bowl. Then I will be happy. That could be interesting. Well, Bengals Buccaneers will be fun on Sunday.
It should be. It should be. It should be another win for the rolling Cincinnati Bengals, the hottest team in the AFC, longest win streak of any team in the American Football Conference.
Can you get one solid month of play calling from Zach Taylor? I think we've gotten a month and a half.
Yeah, he's been very good. Been one of the best coaches in the NFL since week 4.
Absolutely. Bengals been 9-2 since they were 0-2. He's my colleague at All Bearcats and Sports Illustrated, Russ Heltman, joining me today here on Locked On Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, at Russ Heltman11 on Twitter, at Frankie_Natty for yours truly. Of course, I'm on Instagram, AlexFrank9_, and email at alex3frank@gmail.com. Russ, we'll talk to you soon. Enjoy the Fenway Bowl, Wasabi Fenway Bowl, the basketball game tonight, which I imagine you're going to tonight.
Oh, yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. Another trip to Fifth Third in store. I'm excited.
You will be there. Looking forward to reading your stuff after the game. I'll have a brief recap after the game myself. We'll do it all over again next week on early signing day. How about that, Russ? Early signing day, live room edition. Be there or be square at 12:30 Eastern time.
No doubt about it. We will have plenty to talk about on early signing day next Wednesday. Should be a lot of fun, Alex. See you then.
Yep. No question about that. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day. How about for your second listen today? Check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. For Locked On Bearcats, I'm Alex Frank. Thanks for joining this live room. Podcast form will be up shortly. Have a great rest of your day, and I will be back here tomorrow right here on Locked On Bearcats.